Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've called this press briefing this afternoon following the announcement earlier by Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, Minister of Health and Wellness, who indicated to the nation that amongst 3 individuals who recently tested positive for COVID-19 is a 15-year-old Barbadian student. Joining me at this briefing is Chief Education Officer Acting Ms. Joy Adamson, Mrs. Betty Aline Headley, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, Dr. Wendy Lewis, the Principal Acting of Ellerslie Secondary School, Lieutenant Colonel Errol Brathwaite, outgoing Principal of the Ellerslie Secondary School, and also joining later will be Mary Redmond, President of the BSTU, and Mr. Herbert Gittins, General Secretary of the Barbados Union of Teachers, and Dr. Kenneth George, Chief Medical Officer. I would also have had the opportunity to speak to and to brief Mr. Akani McDowell of the NUPW. And we are here this afternoon really to speak to the public about the announcement that was made earlier. The student is a 5th form student of the Ellerslie Secondary School, and from all reports thus far received, she is doing well. I would want, on behalf of the Ministry of Education, to wish her a speedy recovery, as I'm sure she's anxious to return to school as quickly as possible. I would also want to extend best wishes to her family as well, because I know that they too have been affected by COVID-19 at this point in time. Earlier today, we met with Ministry of Health officials and the Minister of Health and Wellness, who updated us on the details of the recent cases. They updated us on the efforts at contact tracing and the measures which we must now put in place in order to ensure the safety of our students and teachers at the Ellerslie Secondary School while investigations continue. While I am confident that the Ministry of Health and Wellness will be able to wrestle this situation to the ground, as they have done in all other cases to date, which have required their intervention, the Ministry of Education, after consultation with the union representatives, has agreed to the temporary closure of the Ellerslie Secondary School for a period of 14 days from tomorrow, the 5th of October, and the classes will therefore resume on the 19th of October. During this time, we are asking all parents, students, and teachers to cooperate fully with the Ministry of Health officials as they continue to do contact tracing. Students must, wherever possible, remain at home, and parents should contact the Ministry of Health and Wellness hotline in the event that they develop symptoms of any kind associated with COVID-19. Any student or member of staff who may wish also to be tested, who may not have come into contact with the young lady, will obviously not be refused at this stage. Fortunately for us, the students at the Ellerslie School have always embraced the use of technology, and the students are very familiar with working in an online environment. In fact, over the course of the early part of COVID-19, there were some of the students who I interfaced with in a virtual classroom. And our reports to date indicate that there are just over 100 students at the school whom it has been reported are not in possession of a device, and whom we are making best efforts to ensure that they are provided with such devices to be able to continue to be able to educate themselves over the course of the next 2 weeks. It is also our intention to thoroughly clean the school plant before the return to school, and that cleaning will start from this week, but we'll continue to ensure, under the guidance of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, that everything is in place prior to the reopening of school. I want to take the opportunity to remind Barbadians that across the world, persons have opened their schools, and in short order, in many cases, they have also had to close their schools. This is not new to the rest of the world, and it certainly is not at this point new to Barbados. We are no different, but I do believe that where we have certainly been able to blaze a trail is that we've been able to work with all of our stakeholders to get our schools reopened in a timely manner, to do so in a safe environment, to ensure that all health and safety protocols have been followed. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has now become our new norm. And from time to time, we have all come to accept that we have to respond and readjust our interventions accordingly. I am confident, however, in the ability of the officers in the Ministry of Health and Wellness to deal with this situation. This is the third time, I believe, that we have had transmission, which involved a cluster of cases. Many of you would remember a few months ago, we had a situation where there was transmission within our churches. There was a cluster that was found. The Ministry of Health and Wellness was able to intervene on that occasion. And through the efforts of contact tracing, they were able to find the various persons and treat to that situation as a matter of urgency. We also had the case of the National Assistance Board, which is no mystery to the public. We disclosed that up front in terms of the issues that arose in relation to that matter. And immediately the Ministry of Health and Wellness intervened and was able to also conduct contact tracing and to be able to locate persons who subsequently had tested positive. I think back in July as well, our health officials responded to a positive test of a student at the University of the West Indies who had returned to Trinidad, and they were subsequently asked by the Ministry of Education in Trinidad to certainly conduct tracing of about 30 students here at the University of the West Indies. The fact remains that the Ministry of Health and Wellness has been managing this situation as it relates to COVID-19, and we are indeed grateful to them for their guidance and continued direction given to the Ministry of Education. Immediately after this press conference, the intention is to meet with the staff, all the teachers, administrators, ancillary staff online of the Ellerslie Secondary School, because in the way that we have conducted ourselves thus far, we recognize that we have to engage with our stakeholders even more than before, and particularly in this COVID-19 environment. So that meeting will be held shortly after, and those of you who are listening, who are part of that institution, can be assured that we will be able to listen to your concerns and certainly be able to set the tone for the next couple of weeks, but also for the rest of the school term as well. I want to thank the unions at this point as well for their maturity in this issue. From the time that they received the call this afternoon, they responded positively to meet with us and to certainly share concerns of their stakeholders, but certainly to help us to find a way forward as it relates to this matter. It is not obviously an easy issue to deal with. We know that they're going to be grappling with people who have different views as it relates to whether schools should be open, whether it should be closed, whether the entire country should be shut down. But what we are united on is the fact that we have to, even more than ever, step up the protocols as it relates to sanitization, the wearing of masks, ensuring that there's physical distancing. Over the course of the past week or so, as we have done our review of the reopening of school, the Chief Education Officer acting has been meeting with the principals and the various unions, and the fact remains that some of our students are still not wearing the masks as we would like. And therefore, we are obviously at a point now with this particular case where it has pretty much come home, I think, to most Barbadians that our students can at some point be affected, whether directly or indirectly. It therefore means that I'm calling on all Barbadians to heed the warning, to heed the call that also needs to go to them to ensure that they reinforce the safety protocols that are necessary at this point in time. Let us not take anything for granted. Remind your children to wear their masks, remind them to sanitize, and to ensure that they are at a reasonable distance away from each other, particularly at points of play. In the coming days this week, we will have the school monitors being trained as we get ready to be able to deploy them across the primary school system. And of course, we will continue the sensitization with them in the school plants so that they're also equipped to assist our teachers in education as we try to grapple with all that is come to the fore as it relates to COVID-19. For those of you who wish to express any concerns or wish to contact the Ellerslie School directly, the email is info@ellerslieschoolbb.org, and you can always contact the COVID hotline at 536-4500. So our situation as it stands right now is one which I think we have perhaps not wanted to accept would come to Barbados, but certainly the discovery of a student at the age of 15 contracting COVID is one which places us all certainly on our guard, and we therefore need to continue to take the necessary precautions as a nation and not drop our guard. As Minister Bostic has continued to repeat to this country, there must be no retreat and no surrender. We give you the commitment from the Ministry of Education, working with all of the stakeholders, that we are going to continue to do what is in the best interest of our teachers and indeed all of our students, and to make sure that they are safe and secure in the working environment. I'll open the floor at this point if there are any questions from the press. Sorry?
Is there going to be any testing for any person that the student would have gotten in contact with?
I'll let Dr. George speak to that briefly, but I think they would have indicated that contact tracing, which they've done on every other occasion, will certainly be the norm and will be applied in this situation. And I think the efforts have already started, so those will continue over the course of the next couple of days. Dr. George, you want to?
I'll take off my mask. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so contact tracing has commenced with good rigor. Every single avenue we will run down where it is possible. We require the public's assistance with this. So if someone comes knocking on your door and asks you to assist and cooperate, answering a few questions and even being subjected to testing, we would really appreciate your cooperation. At this point in time, the Ministry of Health is supporting the Ministry of Education through this event. We will continue to do the contact tracing within the schools to determine who is most at risk and who will be tested. We are going to determine who is most at risk and who will be tested. If that means the entire class 5s, we will do that. If that means more classes, or if it comes to the point where other schools might have been involved because students mix, we are willing to guide and take the decisions. But the issue is, let the contact tracing epidemiological science guide the way in this discussion. Thank you.
Roger, before you go, can you make a definition of a community spread? People still confused.
So community spread occurs when you no longer have the ability to contact trace. So you lose your ability to say that a case might have spread from one individual to another individual. For example, in the United States. So we don't have community spread. What we have is a cluster of cases where everyone so far has been related to the first UK visitor. So it certainly does not meet the criteria for community spread. That's the definition.
Is there fear that it may get to that point, given how students tend to mingle?
Well, that's a decision that we will take when that issue comes about. We have to be vigilant, and I think the main takeaway from this press conference is that there are some issues that are worrisome to the COVID monitoring unit, particularly students congregating after school in large groups without using masks. I believe that the school environment is fairly a safe environment because you're following the protocols. But there are a lot of issues that occur after the school where children go on minibuses, some of them not wearing masks, and just congregate after school hours without social distancing or using masks. Thank you.
Would you be able to tell us how many students the said student would have been in contact with on the days that she was?
We have identified those days. I do not have that information to hand, but we have identified the days that she was at school, and we have also we did a lot of work in her household. That was our first point of business. And then we are going to stratify persons according to risk at the school and make a determination who is to be tested. Thank you.
Also, is the 4-month-old in nursery?
The 4-month-old is at Harrison's Point.
Were they in the nursery?
Not to the best of my knowledge. Thank you.
The 14-day closure of
Ellerslie Secondary.
Mhm.
Would that be protocol for all schools if a student is found to have COVID?
We follow the recommendations of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, who at this time have advised us to close for 14 days. As you can appreciate, the contact tracing is a very scientific approach that they take to finding out who are the persons that the young lady would have come into contact with. And so we will continue to follow the science. And the science says we close for 14 days to allow them to continue their investigations. Okay. I don't know if the representatives of the union wish to say anything at this point, but I will, no, they're fine. Ms. Redmond, you're good? Thank you.
Good evening. In our discussions earlier with the Chief Medical Officer, we were assured that if the student has been found to have commingled, or if there are relatives in the household or in households nearby that could be or that are found to be positive, then of course similar protocols would follow. In the meantime, of course, because we know that the schools potentially are hotbeds of infection, because of the numbers of people in the school at any one point in time, still, even though we are doing the blended approach, we are urging that parents underscore the importance of children wearing their masks and that they follow the proper protocols. We are also asking that the principals of schools reinforce this. We are at a very serious stage in this infection. And it has to be the number one thing in schools now, that students adhere at all times and in all circumstances to the protocols as they have been outlined. And so we are asking for the cooperation of both parents and school administrators in this regard.
All right, so in closing, I just want to thank all of you for attending and certainly for listening. I want to thank the union representatives, Dr. Kenneth George as well from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, both principals and the chairman of the Board of Management of the Ellerslie Secondary School, and to really just simply reinforce to everyone that we're all in this together. I don't think any of us want to witness any of our students or anyone in Barbados being affected or impacted by COVID-19. But it is a reality that it is here to stay, and therefore we have to manage the situation more than anything. And I think that together we have demonstrated, certainly thus far, that we are more than capable and competent of being able to deal with the issues frontally. We may not always agree on everything, but I think there is consensus in terms of us being able to work together in the best interests of our students and certainly our teachers across the education system, and that is what we will continue to do. So I'm encouraging all persons to continue to wear their mask and continue to sanitize, and just to ensure that they encourage students to continue to safe distance as well.
Final question. What does it mean for teachers on Ellerslie School who have children at other schools? Is there a special protocol for them, for contact tracing or anything?
Again, I think Dr. George was very clear that the contact tracing has already started. I think you can appreciate that each of the persons who have been infected and who've tested positive will provide a list of places they've been, persons they've come into contact with. And if those persons have happened to be children, obviously the necessary steps will be taken. I think he was very clear in relation to that. And again, just to remind that the Ministry of Health and Wellness has really been going beyond the call of duty to try to wrestle these issues to the ground. And again, we just have to work with them and to cooperate with them fully to ensure that they're able to keep all Barbadians as safe as possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.